In the quiet countryside of Bellgrove, Montana, the frost came early in 1994. A small farming community nestled between forested hills and frozen lakes, Bellgrove had always been known for its peaceful charm, homegrown produce, and generations-old cattle farms. With fewer than 600 residents, news traveled fast and change came slow. That's why, when the Winters family missed Sunday service, the town took notice. By Wednesday, when no one had seen any of them, concern grew into unease. On the morning of October 21st, Earl Madsen, owner of the local feed and supply store, called the sheriff's office with a trembling voice. "They ain't been in for their weekly pickup. That ain't right." Sheriff Delmar Price dispatched Deputy Clara Hart to investigate. Clara, a Bellgrove native herself, had grown up playing with Sarah Winters, the youngest child in the Winters family. As she drove down the snow-frosted gravel road that led to the Winters homestead, she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. The gate was open. A single boot lay overturned in the driveway. The barn doors creaked in the wind, and not a single cow could be seen in the field. Clara parked her cruiser, stepped out, and called, "Mr. Winters? This is Deputy Hart. You home?" There was no answer. She approached the house first. The porch was swept clean. A coffee mug still sat on the railing, its contents frozen over. Knocking produced no result. She peered in the front window and saw the kitchen table set for 5, with plates, cups, and silverware arranged just so. A pot rested on the stove, untouched. Something felt preserved, like a scene from a museum or a shrine. But no one was inside. Clara circled the house, found no sign of forced entry. She then turned her attention to the barn. As she approached, the silence deepened. No rustling of hay, no mooing, not even the chirp of birds. When she opened the door, a wave of cold air met her, far colder than the temperature outside. It smelled of rotting wood, wet straw, and something else, something faintly metallic. The interior was dim, beams of morning sun filtering through cracks in the siding. As her eyes adjusted, she saw broken tools scattered on the floor and dried corn husks trampled into the mud. Then she saw the first bloodstain, dark, congealed, and sprayed high against the western wall. Her breath caught in her throat. Moving further in, she found the Winters' old workbench overturned. Their antique tractor, rusted and barely functioning, had been dragged into the middle of the barn and positioned to block the entrance. Someone, or something, wanted this space sealed. At the back, near the hayloft ladder, Clara discovered something that would haunt her forever. 5 pairs of boots, each set lined up perfectly beneath the old family table. One of them was unmistakably Sarah's, with the faded blue daisy painted on the toes. Her radio crackled to life. She raised the mic with shaking fingers and called it in. "We've got something wrong out at the Winters farm. Send backup. Bring the coroner. Bring everybody." But she didn't say what she saw. Not yet. Beneath the table, the family dog, Buck, lay curled in a fetal position. He was emaciated, bones sharp under matted fur. His collar had been chewed through halfway, as if he had tried to free himself, gnawing until death took him. There were scratches on the barn door, too high to be from the dog. The kind of marks made by fingernails or claws. Outside, the clouds had rolled in thick and heavy, casting the entire property in shadow. Clara stepped back into the cold air, her mind spinning. She knew something terrible had happened. Something more than a family vanishing. This was staged, meticulously, ritualistically, not random. The backup would arrive in 30 minutes, but by then the shadows in the barn had shifted. The bloodstains no longer looked like stains. They looked like symbols. Symbols Clara had seen before, etched into old textbooks, in a chapter she had once laughed off as folklore. Devil signs, her grandmother used to call them. The kind that don't just mark a place, they trap something inside. And whatever was inside that barn was still there. The wind howled across the frozen fields, tugging at Clara's coat as she stepped away from the barn. Her breath came in ragged clouds, each exhale laced with dread. She kept her hand near her holster but didn't draw. Not yet. She wasn't even sure a bullet would help, not with what she'd seen carved into the barn wall. She turned to face the structure once more. It loomed now, not like a building, but a tomb, a warning, a cage. Inside, the darkness had thickened, swallowing the weak shafts of daylight. She tried to convince herself it was just her eyes, her nerves, but deep down she knew. The barn was holding something. Static crackled in her radio again. Then silence. Then a voice. Not the dispatchers, not anyone she recognized. It whispered something low, indecipherable, guttural. She snatched the mic off her shoulder and shouted, "Say again, this is Deputy Hart. Who is this?" Only silence answered. Her cruiser sat down the drive, engine ticking in the cold. She started back toward it, quickening her pace. But as she passed the house again, something moved inside. A flicker in the window. A figure? No. Nothing. She reached the door, flung it open and stepped into the kitchen. The warmth had long since died. The table was still perfectly set, but now the cups were empty. The pot on the stove had cracked down the side, leaking something thick and black onto the burner. Clara backed away slowly. The hallway creaked to her right. "Hello?" she called. Footsteps upstairs. Not heavy. Bare. Deliberate. Her heart pounded. Slowly, she drew her sidearm and clicked the safety off. Each step up the staircase was a scream of wood. She reached the landing, swept her flashlight down the corridor. The Winters' bedroom door was ajar. Just inside, the edges of a rocking chair swayed back and forth. Nobody visible in the seat. She moved toward it, gun raised. The chair stopped. The air changed. Then, laughter. High-pitched, soft, like a child. It came from the guest room at the end of the hall. Clara spun, light cutting through dust and darkness. She stepped carefully toward the sound, forcing her breath to stay calm. Her mind screamed to leave, but she had to know. The door creaked open with her push. Toys were scattered across the rug. Sarah's old dolls, stuffed animals, a wooden puzzle. Something sat propped in the child-sized armchair by the window. It was a doll. Clara remembered it. A raggedy red yarn-haired thing with button eyes. But now the eyes were missing. In their place, blackened pits. Burn marks ringed the sockets. Around the base of the chair, small circles had been drawn in chalk, intersecting triangles within them. More symbols. Old ones. And then she saw the writing on the wall. Not paint. Blood. Faded, but fresh enough to glisten where the sun struck. One word repeated over and over, smeared by a child's hand. Below. She backed out of the room, nearly tripping over a fallen board. Her radio screamed static again. This time a word hissed through, like breath through teeth. Clara. Her blood turned to ice. No one should have known her name. Not here. Not now. Then her cruiser radio blared to life, loud enough to echo down the stairs. "Deputy Hart, come in. This is Sheriff Price. What's your status? We're 10 minutes out." She grabbed the mic. "I'm still at the Winters property. Sheriff, it's not right here. She stopped. Downstairs, the front door was wide open. She had closed it behind her. She was certain. Boot prints. Wet ones. Leading in from the snow. They trailed through the kitchen, then vanished halfway across the floor. She followed them. Slowly. Knees shaking. They ended at the basement door. It was ajar. Clara reached for it, her hand trembling. Something scraped beneath. Something heavy. Breathing. Then came a whisper. Below, the floor groaned. She yanked the door open and aimed her light down the staircase. Nothing but darkness, then movement, something crawling just out of reach. And then a face, not human, pale, eyes like coins, grinning. She slammed the door shut and bolted it. Sirens rose in the distance. Finally. Help. She raced outside, eyes darting to the barn. The door was now wide open. The blood symbols on its walls shimmered faintly, like heat mirage. From within, a low voice began to chant. Slow, measured, ancient. 3 sheriff's cruisers pulled into the drive just as Clara collapsed against her own car, pointing toward the barn. "Don't go in," she screamed, but it was too late. Deputy Kyle Timmons had already crossed the threshold. The others followed. The chanting stopped. A gust of wind exploded from the barn, knocking snow and gravel in all directions. Every window shattered. The cows, wherever they had been, began to scream from the woods. A noise like tearing metal filled the sky. Then silence. The backup deputies stumbled out minutes later, pale, sweating, eyes wide with madness. One of them had carved a triangle into his own palm. Kyle vomited onto the ground and started sobbing uncontrollably. "There's something in the walls," he kept saying. "In the wood. In the bones." Sheriff Price ordered the barn sealed and the Winters farm quarantined. But that night, every dog in Bellgrove began to howl. Every mirror in town cracked down the center. And far beneath the Winters land, something old turned over in its slumber, stirred by blood, by symbols, by the sound of a little girl laughing in the dark. The Winters were never found. Only their boots remained. And the barn still stands, waiting. Deputy Clara Hart stood frozen beneath the rafters of the Winters barn, her breath barely misting in the still air. The silence had grown thicker. It wasn't just absence. It was resistance, as if the walls themselves wanted her out. She stepped back slowly, her boots crunching straw and old corn husks. The radio on her belt hissed and squealed, then fell silent. No response, just the echo of her own pulse pounding behind her ears. Outside, the wind had stilled. The snow had begun falling again, quiet, slow flakes drifting sideways like ash. Clara looked toward the house, then back at the barn. The blood symbols on the walls had shifted, not smeared, changed. The largest one, etched high above the hayloft in what looked like old animal blood, now pulsed faintly beneath a crack of gray light. It was no longer just a symbol. It was a door. She turned and ran, not out of panic, but purpose. Clara remembered the stories her grandmother told, the warnings. "If the signs come back, child, don't read them with your eyes. Read them with your bones. 'Cause they ain't letters. They're locks. And locks mean something's trying to get out." Back in her cruiser, she opened the trunk. Buried beneath emergency blankets and a snow shovel was her grandfather's old Bible, leather-wrapped, water-stained, and filled with strange bookmarks her grandmother had added over the years. Wildflower petals, dried red thread, scraps of feathers. She grabbed it and headed back into the barn. Inside, the light had dimmed even more. It was hard to tell the hour. Time felt suspended. She whispered as she walked, Psalm 23, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow." But her voice caught again, because something was now hanging from the rafters. A rope, frayed, old, moving slightly, but there was no wind. Beneath it, the dog's corpse was gone. Just gone. Then came a sound, a low groan, not from any throat, but from the building itself. The rafters shifted, the far wall flexed as if breathing. From the hayloft above, straw began to fall. Something, or someone, was up there. Clara climbed the ladder, gun drawn, flashlight clipped to her shoulder. At the top, the beam of light caught a pair of eyes, not animal, not fully human, sunken, milky white, hollow. The figure lurched forward, slow, hunched, draped in burlap and old cowhide stitched crudely with barbed wire. Its arms were far too long, dragging the floor, fingertips trailing blood. It had no mouth, but it was trying to speak. Clara froze. The figure raised a hand and scratched into the wood floor a single word. "Stay." She fired once. The echo rang through the barn, splintering the quiet. When the dust settled, nothing. Just blood. Just claw marks. Just a worn, crooked smile carved into the wall where the figure had been crouched. Then, headlights. Backup had arrived. Sheriff Delmar stepped out first, followed by 2 deputies and a local ranger. Clara stumbled out, face pale, eyes wide. "There's something in the hayloft," she said. "But it's not alive the way we know." Sheriff Delmar nodded solemnly, his jaw tight. "I figured." He reached into his coat and pulled out a rusted iron key. "My daddy was sheriff in '66. Said this might come back someday." He walked toward the barn, but before crossing the threshold he drew a circle in the snow with his boot, salt from his pocket. As he stepped inside, the door creaked, then slammed shut behind him. From outside, they heard nothing, and then screaming, not his voice, but voices, many, at once, and only one word repeated, echoing across the snow-laden fields. "Stay." They tried the barn door, but it wouldn't move. It didn't just lock, it sealed. Clara pounded with her fists, salt still clinging to her coat sleeve. "Sheriff Delmar," she shouted. "Can you hear me?" Nothing but wind. Then, for just a moment, a low, wet, gurgling sound, like something trying to breathe through earth. Deputy Sykes ran to the cruiser for the crowbar. Ranger Ellis whispered a prayer she hadn't said since her father died. Inside the barn, all light vanished behind a wall of black. 37 seconds later, the barn opened itself. No hands touched the door. It simply swung. The air that rolled out was warm, foul, and breathing. The scent was of wet fur, old coins, and burnt feathers. Clara stepped forward, but Delmar wasn't there. The barn was empty. Every trace of the hayloft, of the rope, of the creature, gone. Not even a bullet hole remained. Only the wall bore a fresh mark, carved deep into the wood. A circle of 5 tally lines crossed through by a 6th, and beneath it, smeared in blood, it's waking. They searched the grounds till morning. Delmar's truck was still idling. His coat still hung on the hook by the door, his keys in the ignition, no prints but his own. By 7 a.m., the sun cut low through the frost-heavy trees. Clara and the remaining team gathered outside the Winters house, watching steam rise from its chimneyless roof. No one had lived there for 3 decades, not since the Winters family vanished. 3 children, a father, a mother, and their dog. Each found in 1966, they said, not dead, not missing, but emptied. Faces intact, but their expressions were wrong. Like masks stretched over candlelight that had just blown out. Back at the station, Clara locked herself in the archives. She searched the old files, the real ones, not the reports that made it into the state system, but the handwritten logs kept by Sheriff Dale Delmar Sr. inside a brittle red folder labeled Bellgrove Events, Private, Do Not File. She found these. A photo of a crude wooden effigy with 6 arms and no face. A newspaper clipping from 1912. Preacher's wife found hollow in cellar. A map with red chalk circles drawn around Bellgrove 5 miles out. And a 6th, deep in the woods, labeled simply, Mouth. Clara leaned back, staring at the old photo of the effigy. It wasn't burlap. It was stitched skin, and one of the arms bore something familiar, a sheriff's badge, from Delmar Sr. That night, the snow fell hard. Clara didn't go home. She sat in her cruiser, parked beside the barn, headlights off. She wasn't watching for movement. She was waiting for the stillness, that exact moment the world inhaled. At 2:03 a.m. it came. The wind froze. The deer stopped. The barn breathed. She stepped out, and across the field, rising just barely from the snow, was a hand, fingers bent backward, skin gray, on the wrist, the same rusted watch Delmar wore that morning, and scratched into the ice beside it. We never left. We're just deeper now. Clara did not scream. She did not even blink. She simply stared at the hand, half frozen, bent backward, its fingertips clawing at nothing but ice and dirt. The watch on the wrist ticked once, only once. And then, with a sickening hiss, the hand sank beneath the snow, Not pulled, not swallowed. It retracted, like something remembering it should not be seen. Clara dropped to her knees and clawed at the frost with her bare hands. But there was no hole, no body, no sign Delmar had ever been there. Only the scratched message remained in the ice. We never left. We're just deeper now. Back at the station, the radio crackled. "Clara, you there? You best get to Pine Hollow. Something's off." It was Deputy Ritchie, voice dry and half-panicked. "Off how?" Clara replied. A long pause. "There's music," he said. "From inside the old mine. It's playing something wrong." Clara didn't ask what that meant. She knew. Everyone who grew up around Bellgrove knew. Some melodies don't come from instruments. They come from memory. And some memories aren't yours. She reached Pine Hollow by 3:12 a.m. The air shimmered like oil over water. The ground pulsed softly. Not a quake, not a tremor, but a heartbeat beneath the snow. Ritchie stood at the mine's edge, flashlight off, hat in his hand. He didn't speak, just pointed. Clara leaned forward. From the darkness inside, a soft lullaby drifted out, low, warped, like a child's toy underwater. "Rock-a-bye, baby," in the treetop. But it wasn't a child's voice. It was hundreds, layered, warped, like memories trapped in teeth. Clara stepped forward. "Ritchie, back away from the—" But it was too late. He dropped his hat, let his arms fall to his side, and stepped into the mine. Clara lunged after him. The tunnel swallowed them both. Darkness like wool soaked in tar. She couldn't see her own hands, but she could hear Ritchie's boots crunching ahead. Steady, deliberate. "Ritchie, stop!" The lullaby slowed. "When the bow breaks." Clara struck her flashlight. It flickered, sputtered, then lit. The tunnel was no longer timber and stone. The walls had changed. Now they were fleshy, ribbed, pulsing. Veins glistened like roots in the cold. Ritchie was ahead, arms out, walking toward a pulsing red door. No hinges, no frame, just a slab of skin stretched tight across an arch of bone. "Don't touch it," Clara shouted, but Ritchie did not pause. He laid both hands flat against it, and it opened, not inwards, not sideways, but outward, like a wound splitting down the middle, and inside, a chamber, circular, padded with what looked like hair and glass. The walls moved, not from wind or sound, but from breathing thoughts. In the center sat the old Winters family dog. Only it wasn't a dog. Its skin was stitched from the faces of other animals. Its eyes were hollow, but the sockets blinked. And it whispered in Ritchie's voice, "Sheriff Delmar is part of us now." Clara couldn't scream. Her throat locked. From the chamber's edge, something rose, a figure in a sheriff's uniform, hat in hand, but the skin was waxen, pulled too tight, and the smile stretched ear to ear. "Clara," it said, in a dozen voices that tried to sound like Delmar. "You need to join him. There's so much room in here." Ritchie turned slowly, eyes weeping mud. "She saw the mark," he said to the figure. "She's dreaming on the wrong side." Then the walls began to hum. Clara ran. She didn't know if she screamed, didn't know if her boots hit floor or flesh or memory. The mine twisted behind her, not a straight tunnel, but a spiraling intestine. The lullaby followed her. And down will come Clara, cradle and all. She burst through the mine mouth just as the sun rose, collapsed in the snow, crying, shaking. She looked back. The mine entrance was gone. Only smooth earth remained, as if it had never been there. She returned to the station, covered in frost, mud, and blood. There was no sign of Ritchie, no radio calls, only silence. On her desk was a fresh folder. It hadn't been there before. The label read, "Bellgrove Barn, the 6th opening." Inside, One photograph, a child's drawing. 6 stick figures around a black circle, each with hollow eyes, and beneath it, in a child's hand. We let it out again. Clara sat in silence for hours. At 8:44 a.m., the door to the station creaked open. A little girl walked in barefoot, wearing a tattered white dress. She held something in her hand. Clara stood, gun drawn. "Who are you?" The girl looked up. Her eyes were entirely black, and in her small hand, she held Delmar's tongue, wrapped in cloth. She placed it on the desk and whispered, "You have 1 night left. Then you dream too," and vanished. Deputy Clara Hart stepped into the barn for the last time just after sunset, her breath a cloud in the icy air. The sigils on the walls pulsed faintly now, like dying embers in ash. Sheriff Delmar Price stood behind her, lantern in hand, his face pale and glistening with fear. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. She nodded. "We're past sure. We either end this, or it ends more than just this town." They had scoured the records, cross-referenced symbols. Clara's grandmother's journals revealed just enough to terrify. A legend of the Hollowed, an entity that fed on memory, silence, and grief. It moved through generations, marking its space with blood and hiding in places where sorrow slept deepest. The Winters, it seemed, had been chosen, but not without reason. The diary they'd found in the hayloft confirmed it. Tom Winters had once unearthed a stone during a dig near Cold Hollow, just west of Bellgrove. He'd brought it home. A smooth black rock, carved with the same strange spiral found in the barn. It was buried beneath the barn floor, beneath the table. A gateway. Now Clara stood above that spot. She and the sheriff had cleared the tools, overturned the workbench again, and pushed the table aside. Beneath it, the floorboards were carved with the spiraling sigil. In the center, wedged in the soil, was the stone. "Break it," Sheriff Price whispered. Clara raised the sledgehammer. For a breath, all was silent. Then, a low, guttural howl rose from beneath the soil. The barn shook. The lights in the patrol cars outside exploded in sparks. Animals in the woods screamed, scattering in waves. Clara brought the hammer down. The stone cracked once, then split with a high-pitched screech like metal tearing. From the gap, thick black smoke poured out, and something moved within it. Long limbs, hollow eyes, a face without features, only folds of shifting skin. Clara screamed and dropped the hammer. Sheriff Price stepped forward, chanting in a shaking voice the words from Clara's grandmother's notes. "Back to the hollow you go, back to the dust, where no name holds and no soul trusts. You are forgotten, you are undone, your feast is finished, your night is done." The creature roared, the walls cracked, and then, all at once, stillness. The smoke reversed, sucked into the stone like breath into lungs, and the barn went utterly silent. The sigils faded. The cold lifted. They called in the coroner that night. The Winters were never found. Not their bodies, not their spirits, just their boots. And the diary. Buck the dog was buried behind the chapel. Sheriff Price retired a month later. Clara stayed. Bellgrove never spoke of it again. The barn was torn down, the soil salted. But still, sometimes near October's end, when frost dusts the hills and the air goes still, the children of Bellgrove swear they hear howling in the trees. A hollow howl. Clara does too. And every year, she lights a candle where the barn once stood. Just in case. Some disappearances leave no trace. But others, they leave a shadow. One that never fades. The Bellgrove Vanishings, 1994. Still unsolved, based on real testimonies. The rest remains a mystery. Sanctified secrets. Subscribe for more chilling stories from the Forgotten Files of America.